Hello and welcome to the Doofcast, the official variety podcast of doofmedia.com. There are two kinds of people in this world. Me, your host, Scott Daly, and Matt Freeman, your co-host. Matt, how's it going?
It's going creepy, Scott.
Creepy?
Yeah, got the lights off in here. And afraid that there's something out in the darkness. So, in exactly the right mood I need to be in for this discussion today.
Do you have 5 to 6 almost full glasses of water in your vicinity?
Well, I have small children, so of course I do.
Well, then you're good.
Oh, good. Okay.
You're good.
All right.
This week on the show, in case you haven't noticed already, we are going to continue our series of deep dives into the films of M. Night Shyamalan with our third film in this marathon, 2003's Signs. This will be a full spoiler discussion of the movie, so you should watch it first. That's kind of what these deep dives are. You should really see the movie first, and then you can listen to us talk about it.
Yeah, and this is one where you really should watch it if you somehow haven't seen this one.
Yeah, I think this is your favorite, correct? Your favorite Shyamalan.
Yeah, this is my favorite Shyamalan movie. I think The Sixth Sense is definitely up there, but I don't know. This one really just nails it for me in a lot of different ways.
Yeah. After we talk about Signs, we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about Detective Pikachu. And then we're going to talk about that episode of Game of Thrones that everyone's talking about.
If we have to.
If we have to. Yeah, but let's just jump right into it and let's talk about Signs.
It is the 18th reported crop site in that country in the last 72 hours.
I'm a little scared. All this stuff on TV. Joe Gills was in here talking about the end of the world.
They're staying in the shadows. It's called probing to make sure things are all clear.
Clear for what?
For the rest of them.
There's a monster outside my room. Can I have a glass of water?
So, Matt, what is Signs?
Well, it's the story of a family living on a farm who find mysterious crop circles in their fields, which suggest something more frightening to come. That's the first, 20 minutes of it, I guess.
Yeah. That is, on the surface, what Signs is about a family in rural Pennsylvania surviving an alien invasion. But the thing that's great about this movie is that that's not really what the movie's about at all. This is not a Shyamalan twist movie, right? I think the twist of this movie is that it's not an alien movie.
Yeah, right. I think that's probably the reason this is my favorite movie, is actually, in addition to the fact that it's just so creepy and it really affected me from the first time I saw it, even when I watched it as an adult, that it's very moving. It's very emotionally effective. You feel a lot for these characters. He takes the time to set up the relationships between these characters and the backstory and the drama that exists between them and the situation that they're in, and he builds it up slowly in that classic Shyamalan way where he's telling you the story not just through the dialogue but also through details of the performances, details of the shots, items that are in the shots. It's just a great little story. It wouldn't even have to be about an alien invasion. It could be about some other sort of adverse occurrence, and I think pretty much the broad strokes of the plot would still work and still make a good movie. Of course, the alien invasion part it just works delightfully well too.
Yeah, but what this movie is an allegory for faith. Yeah, and it's a faith allegory that is so rare, I think, in stories about faith, in that it never comes off as preachy. This is not like a Christian movie, Mm-hmm. This is definitely a movie about a man struggling with his faith. Like the plot of this, the central thing of this movie is that Mel Gibson's character lost his wife in a freak, pointless, stupid accident, and it has completely. He's a father in a Episcopal, I think, right?
Yeah, I think right.
Episcopal is the one that still wears the Catholic collar, but is also able to get married. So he was an Episcopal preacher and has completely abandoned that. And I love, both you and I were raised Catholic. I don't think either of us would call ourselves Catholic anymore, but I think there is something that I relate to a lot, with this idea of a person going through some terrible stuff and struggling with the pointlessness of existence.
Right. Yeah. I mean, when we catch him in the movie, he's actively, I think in the beginning, especially, I wouldn't say he's he's struggling with his faith. I might even say he's rejected, or he's trying to reject.
The struggle is over.
Yeah. And it's actually the material struggle in the story that brings him back to it. And restores his faith, which is an interesting and a fairly unusual concept too, because you're not supposed to need supernatural revelation to have faith, but I guess it helps.
Right. I mean, yeah, it certainly does. And I mean, like, I think that the whole thing is like, the whole basic concept and the reason why the thing's called signs, it's not actually about the crop signals. That's not what it's about at all. The signs are the little moments in our life that we think are random and meaningless, that actually add up to something. And I think, that's basically what the movie is saying, is like, oh yeah, all those random happenstance, nonsense, chaos things that you thought, no, those are actually meaningful. And yes, it is true that most human beings do not get to experience the moment of like, oh no, there actually was a reason for this.
Yeah.
But there is something beautiful in that realization still, in a movie.
Yeah. I mean, and I don't know, this movie just kills me every single time, like the end. And which is funny because, I guess we have to address the elephant in the room, which is that some people think this movie's ridiculous and like they laugh at the ending of it. I don't know what's wrong with me that makes me like a complete mess at the end. And maybe it is the fact that you and I share a similar background, where maybe we've thought about these things in a serious way more than most people.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, I don't find the ending of this movie like funny or anything in the way that the happening, which we're going to eventually get to, is unintentionally funny, or maybe intentionally funny.
Ooh, we'll talk about that.
Now, this movie does have a lot of funny parts,
yeah,
for sure. But the ending to me is like a total effective catharsis and emotional climax.
Yeah, I do think a lot of the reason why people find it funny is the water weakness is something that a lot of people get caught up on. It's like, why would you invade Earth, a planet that's 90% water? It's not 90%, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Majority water. A rainstorm would completely nullify your invasion. And I just want to be like that. Let's not the movie is not about the aliens. Like, that's like, the movie is not about the aliens. The movie doesn't even really care about the aliens. We barely see them.
Yeah. The movie even goes out of its way to kind of make the aliens inscrutable. They're not operating under the same kind of assumptions that humans would be operating if they were to invade, right? Like there's this idea that like they just want to steal the people. They don't even really want to invade Earth. They just want to steal the people. If that's if that's the correct answer, if they're just there to like steal people so they can do something horrible to them or eat them or whatever, then like it doesn't actually matter that the world is covered in water. That they're accomplishing their goal, right? Like I've never for a second like bought those nitpicky complaints. It's like the least convincing, like, oh, I don't know. It's like, no, they're supposed to be creepy and you're not supposed to understand why they're doing it this way, and that's fine. And if you feel like it's confusing, then that's fine. That's what the movie's trying to do.
Yeah. I guess so. The best way to approach this, I want to start at the beginning, because I think openings are something we spend a lot of time on this particular show, because I think openings are so important to setting the tone. And one of the things that really jumped out at me about this movie when I watched it again is the opening score is done by James Newton Howard, who has scored every single one of Shyamalan's movies up to this point. He did Signs, he did Unbreakable, and he did The Sixth Sense as well. And the opening credits of this movie are like loud, bombastic, like huge loud strings, and it just like really jumped out at me, because I think his other two movies started very softly and very slowly and very meditatively, and this movie starts like with this like huge score, like this War of the Worlds type score, and then and then it slows down, and then it goes into this quiet meditative thing. And I think that's kind of the back and forth of this movie, which goes back and forth between this slow, deliberately paced story of a man dealing with the death of his wife with this science fiction invasion story, and it kind of cuts back and forth between the two of them. And I love how that was depicted just in the music, just in what the movie chose to open with.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I mean, I might spin off of that to talk a little bit about how sound is used in general in the movie.
Sure, yeah,
and that's something that's kind of more or less throughout the movie. I think he uses, but for all that he does use music very well, he also uses silence extremely effectively. Silence punctuated by just the quietest little sounds.
Yeah,
and sometimes they're sounds where I think he very carefully chose these to be sounds that could just be something rustling in the reeds. It could just be like branches blowing. It could be an animal. It could be a frog or something. It could be an insect even. But like your brain, I don't know, it's something where it's like just on the edge of like the uncanny valley of being able to place what the sound is. And it kind of like fires up your imagination in the same way that like seeing a shape in the darkness makes you imagine, you kind of automatically imagine what that shape is. You kind of automatically fit the shape of a person to it, which is something that he does visually, by the way, in this exact same movie. But the sounds are so creepy, and the one of the best scenes I think is the sounds on the radio, where it's not silence, but it's you're straining along with the characters to distinguish these subtle creepy sounds from the background static. And that's such a, like, I don't know, you're so like physically tense through that whole scene. It's just a genius kind of device, right? A genius cinematic device to use sounds that way. I can't think of any other horror movie that really does something like this.
Yeah, I mean, I like that baby monitor scene a lot too, because I like what the camera does along with those sounds, because we have this, they're getting out of the car, they're coming back, and the baby monitor starts going off. And then like as they're getting out of the car, like it picks up a new sound, and it kind of elevates to where the scene ends with the four of them on the car, on top of the car, linking hands, holding the baby monitor in the air. And it isn't until they all touch and link hands that the sound really comes in the clearest, where you actually can hear the two aliens talk back and forth. And I just like the visual of that, of this family of four linking together is the one time that the thing becomes clear. And I think that's very fitting with the theme, whereas every person in this thing had a role to play in the events that happen at the end of the movie. And so I think that's a great visual setup of like the importance of togetherness, of these four people together. And I thought that was really great.
Absolutely, yeah. I didn't notice that consciously until you pointed it out, but that's an example of the kind of thing that he's always doing in these movies. The stuff in the background is actually telling the story just as much as the dialogue is. Yeah,
and I want to talk about that a lot too, because I think one of the great things this movie does is how it introduces us to its characters. Like the movie doles out information at a very slow, deliberate pace. Like this movie opens on a shot of a yard through a window, right? There's like, it's a shot that the movie returns to several times, is the shot through Mel Gibson's bedroom window, and you see the grill, you see the picnic table, you see the swing set, and you see the play gym. And it's like this, like it's the shot through glass, which is something we know Shyamalan likes to do. He likes to shoot through glass and shoot reflections a lot. And it's just that empty yard, and that he'll return to that shot multiple times in the movie, and he finishes on that shot. We kind of pull back, the camera pulls back into the house and frames that shot, and we see the four of them laying on the grass there in the exact same way the shot was framed before, which I think is excellent. But what's cool about it is like, I think that sets up like this quintessential like Americana type of family unit. Like it's like you got the grill, the picnic table, the jungle gym, and it's like, so it's it's a basic American family. And then we like the Shyamalan made the glass on that window kind of like imperfect. It's ripply. So as the camera pulls back from it, that image ripples a bit. And then that's when he cuts to the image of the family on the photo that's in the room that shows the four of them together. And then Mel Gibson pops up into the frame. blocking that photo out because he's waking up from a bad dream. And then we go to a long shot of him in the bed alone. And it's just like the way it sets the stuff up is so great because like it has not said his wife is dead. It has not said he's a preacher that's lost his faith. It hasn't said any of these things, but we see him laying in the bed alone. We see this distorted image of their front yard. Later, when he's in the bathroom brushing his teeth, we'll see like the image of a cross on his wall, but it's like the
the stain, basically,
the
right?
stain, where he's removed the cross and it had been there for so long. So like all this stuff is telling us a story about this family before really any line of dialogue is spoken.
Yeah. I mean, speaking of things that are kind of played slowly, just the whole thing with his brother, where I can't possibly remember what I believed the first time I watched this movie, but I think that your suspicion is probably like, okay, it's his. Eventually, you figure out it's his brother, and then you're like, why is this man living with them? Oh, it's his brother. Okay, I guess it's like his shiftless brother who's a failure, and then you eventually realize, like, no, actually, like. His brother may have his own problems, but the reason his brother's living with him is to help him.
Yeah.
Which is kind of the reverse of I think what you assume at first.
Yeah, I think you're right. There is that line from the cop eventually that says, it's really great you moved in here after. Mm-hmm. And he's like, I'm not helping. He's like, no, you are helping. And yeah, I mean, this family dynamic is super complicated. I love Merrill, the brother, played by Joaquin Phoenix, the greatest actor of all time. I kind of wish, if I had one complaint about this movie, is that I wanted more Joaquin Phoenix because he's so good. But the role he's in this movie is really fantastic. He's playing kind of an aloof character. Most of the comedy of this movie comes from Merrill.
Yeah.
But I think he does a great job with it.
Yeah, it's a really kind of downplayed, quiet performance where it's one of those ones where, like, if you didn't already know that Joaquin Phoenix was amazing, then you would just watch this movie and like not notice him explicitly.
Yeah,
because
I think the first time I saw it, that's kind of what I did, honestly.
Yeah, but he is incredible in the movie. It's just he's being incredible in a way that is serving the movie and kind of letting Mel Gibson take the spotlight. Because Mel Gibson is the one who is like tortured and tormented and breaking down under the strain of not like feeling like he's failing his children, feeling like he's lost his faith, he's lost his wife, everything's terrible. I think good to talk about Mel Gibson's performance here because the movie kind of doesn't work without Mel Gibson's performance here.
Yeah, and let's put aside our personal feelings about Mel Gibson as a human,
right? You have to.
And yeah, I think he's remarkable here.
Yeah.
I think like Shyamalan gets this performance out of him that, similar. I think it's similar. Like the last two movies we watch have both been Bruce Willis, and they've both been, it's a similar type of character who's this very kind of quiet, sad, reserved character. But the thing that I loved about Mel Gibson's version of this is, he's struggling. He's miserable. He's completely lost his faith. He's unsure of what to do, but he's also like a really good dad still. Bruce Willis did not really care for his kid until late in Unbreakable, right?
Right.
Like I never doubted that Mel Gibson loved his children,
right,
and was trying to be the best possible dad he could for his children.
Yeah, he was just struggling with his own personal issues, but he was
right.
And maybe felt like a bit of a failure, but that's not because he wasn't trying. And I think my favorite scene of the movie in terms of like destroying me, is the dinner scene at the end when
oh my god
when they make all of their favorite foods and then he's just like getting angry, but he's not actually angry. He's actually scared and desolated. Yeah. And just the performance, like that's kind of my favorite thing about Mel Gibson is when he, like in every Mel Gibson movie, in almost every Mel Gibson movie, there's like the moment where you see all of the pathos that's been in the character the whole time on his face, and he's very good at that moment of just like his face kind of like collapses and you're just like, oh man.
Yeah.
You want to hug him, like that's the moment that kills me.
Yeah. Well, I love that scene. I'm glad you brought that scene. Let's spend forever on it. Cause it's beautiful. And you have this moment where his son Morgan like finally reveals how much he hates him. And it's not like, he doesn't actually hate his dad.
Right.
He blames his dad because he doesn't understand, and he doesn't like it's the lose. Like I can't imagine losing a parent and like it's your fault. You let her die. Like that's a very childish, confused, hurt, angry kid response to that, right? And so he yells at him, and then Mel Gibson just breaks down, and then his kid that just finished saying he hated him is the first one over there to hug him, because it's like this moment of like, oh yeah, like this family recognizing that every single one of them is suffering, every single one of them is having a hard time with this. I think they said it's been 6 months since this happened. It's been basically no time at all, and in the midst of this alien invasion, in the midst of what is quite possibly the end of the world, this family is forced to lean on each other in a way that they have never been before. And yeah, it's beautiful. And then each one, like the thing, Bo comes over too. So Morgan comes over, then Bo comes over. And then I think my favorite part of the scene, you see Mel Gibson grab Meryl to pull him into the hug. It's not like Meryl came into the hug. This is Graham saying, you belong in this as much as anyone else. You are as part of this family as much as anyone else. And I think that's a really great moment.
Yeah,
I love it.
You're making me cry. Yeah, I mean, I think the movie conveys without actually stating outright that ever since the moment that he learned that his wife was going to die, he was basically he was at first like in shock, and then went from shock into just like cold anger, and his son never got to see him actually grieve, and I think that it's fair to say that he hasn't, that he's just been like stuck in this closed off anger, and like that's why Meryl says that he's not helping, is because I forget the Graham Graham is not progressing through grief. He's just completely shut down, and so that's why it's such a great scene. I mean, it, honestly, in this weird alien Shyamalan horror movie, this is one of the like handful of most emotionally impactful scenes that I like would list, you know, like the top 5 most emotional film scenes.
That's great. I love that.
It's amazing. Yeah.
It does work really well. And like the thing that I think one other great part about this is like the kids don't understand this idea of, oh, we don't believe in God anymore. Right. Like, like he's a pastor, a father, whatever you want to call it. It's probably fair to say that God has been a part of their life since their birth. It has always been a cornerstone of their life. And I think that the movie kind of like gives a lot of hints towards that, because the kids are the ones that are constantly mentioning God. Like one of the first lines we hear his son say is at the very beginning of the movie, is when he's standing on the edge of the crop circle in the cornfield. The first thing we hear his son say is, I think God did it. And that's, I mean, that's his son says several times, he talks about God several times. And I think that's part of the anger and the hatred there, is this confusion is like, what do you mean? What do you mean we don't pray anymore? What do you mean we don't say grace before dinner anymore? Like, this doesn't make sense to me. I'm a child. This is what you told me. You told me God was real. You told me this is what we do. And now suddenly that's all gone. It doesn't make any sense to me. And I think that's like, I don't know. That's just it's good writing. It's good character construction.
It's great. Cause I mean, like if you really want to break it down, like Mel Gibson's character is like personally angry at God.
Right. I mean, he literally says that at one point. Yeah.
And he can't possibly explain this to his son because it sort of sounds insane. Like it's, and so he just doesn't get explained. What's funny though is that his son is right. You know, the text of the movie is that God is giving them signs to save their family.
Right. And I mean, the thing that I like about it is it doesn't necessarily even have to be God in the traditional sense, right? The Judeo-Christian sense. It is like textually in the movie because he was a former Episcopal preacher, but the idea is generally that we are not alone, that life is not just a random bit of chaos, that there is something watching out for us in some way.
Yeah.
So yes, to this family, that is their definition of God, but it doesn't have to be just restricted to that. And I think that's why the movie doesn't get overly preachy.
Yeah.
Because it's not really saying this is the correct faith. Yes. Episcopalian. Yes.
I think it's really brilliant how the script does this, because I think you're exactly right that the script never says, it's God. It's Jesus.
Right.
What the script does do is it does give Mel Gibson the scene where he is telling his brother
the theme.
Yeah. Well, he's sort of telling him the opposite of the theme. He's telling him, like, the reason my wife said that was that her brain was sparking randomly as she died, and nothing means anything.
Yeah.
And it's all pointless. And so, like, by stating the opposite of the theme, the film is then able to contradict that without actually having to have an explication. And I think that's really cool. Like, this really cool technique.
But I love that speech, though. Like, I love people break down into two groups when they experience something lucky. You know, one group sees it as just luck, and the other sees it as something more than luck, evidence that there's something up there, right? And he breaks it down as, like, the people that see those lights, you know, some of them feel like it's just nothing and they're terrified but some of them are like, that's evidence of a miracle. That's evidence that God or something else exists, and therefore I feel completely calm. And he's like, and the answer you have to ask yourself is, which one of those are you? And that's what he says to Meryl. And Meryl says, definitely the faith one, because he tells a story about this girl that almost threw up on him, but he realized at the last minute he had gum in his mouth, so he turned to spit it out so she didn't throw up. And he's like, I could have been kissing her when she threw up. And that is his proof positive towards the existence of a higher power.
Yeah. That's great.
It's great because it's perfectly character defining. I mean, it shows how easy some people come to faith, whereas some people struggle with it a lot more. That's just different people have different things with that. But yeah, I mean, he goes on to say, well, which one are you? And Graham says, like, do you feel comforted? He's like, yeah. Then what does it matter?
Yeah.
But that's when he goes on to tell the story about, like, her dying and the nerves firing, and he basically concludes, like, there is no one out there looking out for us, which is, yeah, I mean, the movie proves him wrong. That's the intent of the movie.
Right. I mean, it's interesting that he sort of can't help but be a counselor to his brother, but then he also can't help but go to the dark place because he is not cool with this.
Right.
So that's.
And I think that's Mel Gibson, man. Like, the fact that he can, like, he shifts into where you see the Father Graham that he was before all this in a moment, as he gives the speech, this beautifully written speech about people that see miracles or people that see luck. And it is warm, it is comforting, it is like it's his Mel Gibson, like, soft, like, but you know, I'm trying to think of the word. I don't know, his voice, his Mel Gibson-y voice. Yeah, it does. It does have, like, a fatherly, like, comforting voice. And then he can also shift in a minute to this, I hate the idea of this. God, the idea of God makes me angry now, because it means that, like, the idea that God would take my wife away from me.
That if he exists, that he let this happen or made this happen.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think it's really great that we've basically talked almost this whole time about the dramatic and the character and the filmmaking elements, and not even really talked much about the horror elements, which is like, most of my notes are actually about the horror element and how effective it is. I mean, we talked about the sounds a bit, but just like the visuals, and I mean, I get kind of my list here has, like, the scene where he looks out the window and he sees the silhouette of the alien on the roof. It's one of my favorite shots ever. Similar kind of concept when he's in the cornfield. He's responding to the sounds, and it's just terrifying. There's nothing happening, but he's in a cornfield and there's sounds.
Yeah.
And there may be a person out there as far as he knows. And then there's the leg, but the leg, you can't see the leg because you're just looking at corn stalks. So you can't see the leg until it moves, which is so awesome. That's another completely different thing that I've never seen in a horror movie, where it's like the thing is right there in the scene. I mean, I guess maybe Alien does that. Like, the thing is right there in the scene and you don't see it until it moves.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's definitely been used before, but it's you're absolutely right. It's fantastic. I mean, I think how this movie uses the corn stalks just in general to elicit fear, I think is really great, because I think corn is like tall corn stalks, especially in the dark, are like inherently scary.
Yeah.
Like I literally wrote that down as I was watching this movie. I was like, corn plus night equals bad.
Yeah.
And it's true. Like, you were talking about the sound earlier, just the sound of them running through the corn, this like the swooping by and hitting the corn as they ran is kind of otherworldly in a little bit. Like how often are you sprinting through things that are taller than you and brushing by? Like that just doesn't happen very often. But here, right outside their house is the sea of scary alien hiding corn stalks.
Yeah, right. I mean, there's a lot of, I keep using the term uncanny valley. I don't think that's the right term at all, but I think uncanny might be the right word in that like details about what you're hearing hint that something is wrong.
Yeah.
Like they see what looks like the shape of a man on the roof. They're chasing him around outside. You don't hear footfalls, despite the fact that you clearly hear the footfalls of the two brothers who are chasing. You just hear like intermittent loud impacts as the thing like accidentally makes noise, and then you hear it enter the cornfield again, not having made any footfalls, and like so like all the sounds it makes are just like wrong.
Yeah.
And it really like gets into your animal brain and pushes buttons.
Yeah. And then there's the scene that has stuck with me the most from this movie, which is Joaquin Phoenix watching I think it's in Brazil when the alien walks by the frame.
Yeah.
I don't know why, like that is one of the most effective monster reveal shots I've ever seen in my entire life. And I don't even think it's the shot itself. I think it's the shot back to Joaquin and his performance that really sells it, because it's like, and it's almost as like, it kind of breaks the rules of timing a little bit, because like what happens is we're sitting there and we're watching, the camera's watching the TV, and the alien steps out from the side and then like walks off to the left. It doesn't even do anything. It just steps out, looks creepy, and walks off to the left. And after that is fully finished, the camera then cuts to Joaquin and cuts to his reaction shot, which would have been like timing wise, it would have happened as we saw the alien, but you can't see two things at once, right? So the movie's kind of cheating a little bit and having his reaction shot come technically after the alien has walked out of frame. But it's just so perfect because it's like this horrified, like, oh,
yeah.
Like, I can't even do what he did justice. But it's like that, his reaction to that, to the alien, is seared in my brain.
Yeah, yeah. It's a, I mean, visceral response. It's an automatic like. Verbalization of just like shock, right? And
right.
I mean, there's a reason that reaction is like a GIF, right? Where
it's become
like,
a meme. Yeah,
yeah. It's the perfect version of what that is. Mm-hmm. And I agree with you that first of all, it takes so it's built up so long, right? You've got the
right.
kid screaming. You've got like the element of Joaquin, who I feel like he's kind of the audience insert where he's like, "Get out of the way, move!" You know,
yeah,
like,
move, children, vámonos.
Yeah. and then like you said, the reaction, like it's everything surrounding the alien reveal that is actually impactful, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, and that I love that. Like the editing and the structure here is pretty smart to me too, because like that scene happens right before Mel Gibson walks into Ray, played by M. Night Shyamalan, walks into his house and chops off the alien's fingers. And so it's like we get to see it full before we have Mel Gibson go into the pantry and like do the creepiest thing ever, when you're like on the floor looking under a crack and then taking the knife and using it as a mirror. That like when horror movies do that stuff, when someone's like trying to see under a crack or something and using a mirror or something to try to get, like, that creeps the shit out of me just in general. That scene, the first time I saw that scene, it scared the crap out of me.
Yeah.
When suddenly the alien hand is there.
Right. The hand is there. Like nothing moved, nothing changed. There was no sound, but the hand is right there now.
Yeah. Well, it's like, it's great tension construction, because what it is he gets down on the ground. He looks through the crack. He can't see anything. We do it like a cut. We do this great cut to a shot, an angle that's on the counter. and we see the knife. And so he grabs the knife, goes back under, puts the knife under, doesn't see anything, like has a moment where he's just like, this is ridiculous.
Right.
And he puts the knife down and he's walking out of the door, and then he stops and is like, okay, no, screw it, I'm going to do this. And he storms back in like he's worked he's worked himself up. He's pumped himself up, storms back in, grabs a knife again, goes right down on the ground again, gets in position to look, and then bam, it's
right
there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good tension construction, because the minute you think the tension is released and it's like, okay, he's gonna leave, he's gonna go, we just like, nope, just kidding.
Yeah.
I love it so much.
And that's another shot where his reaction, like recoiling from it, is half of what sells it, at least.
Right. Yeah.
You know, if I had one like thing that I would edit about this movie that I would change, it would be, I think that seeing the alien full form in that, you know, in the Brazil reveal is great. I think seeing the hand is great. I just wish that we saw a little bit less of it at the end of the movie. Like, I'm okay with the scene being the way it was. I just wish that we didn't see maybe a couple of those long shots where you like get a really good look at it.
Yeah, I see. I can see that.
And it's not even because like, oh, it's bad CGI. Like, CGI is fine. It looks good. Like, it was way creepier before I knew what it looked like, and I just was filling it in with my imagination.
Yeah. I mean, I think that Shyamalan tries to avoid as many of those scenes as possible. Like, a lot of the scene is shot via a reflection of the TV set.
Yeah, it's true.
But yeah, I think there's some where you just like this, the geography of the scene needed the alien in it. And I agree. That's kind of like, just like sitting there, like when we see the little proboscis, like pump the gas into, like Morgan's face. Like, yeah, I could see that. Yeah.
I mean, that's a very minor complaint, I think.
Sure.
But
sure.
that's, I mean, I think the movie does so well at hiding it from you that it's a little bit of a letdown that it actually does give it to you in the end. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe if the movie had been the way I'm imagining it, I would have been like, oh, that last scene, like you don't really get a good look at it. And I don't know, I might have been complaining about the opposite thing, but
yeah. I mean, I think at that point, like the reason that I do think it works, and I didn't have that exact same complaint. Like, I get your complaint, but is because by that point the movie has kind of fully gone into the idea that, oh, this isn't actually about this alien. Mm-hmm. So I'm a lot more forgiving of showing the alien, because it's like, oh, I don't actually care about that. I care about Swing Away, Meryl. I care about, the glasses of water.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is like, that's such a clever idea, because as you alluded to at the beginning of the show, that is just a thing that small children do. Like
yeah.
She did it to the extreme, but that's just a thing kids do in general.
Right.
So like, it doesn't come off as like a setup for anything.
Yeah, they just drink a sip and then they set it down, and then later they ask for more water. And it's funny because she's not intentionally scattering water around the house. She just always has an issue with every glass of water, which is another realistic kid thing.
Yeah. It's contaminated.
Yeah.
You don't even know what that means.
Yeah.
It's great. Abigail Breslin is adorable in this movie. I love her so much.
Yeah.
Breslin.
Yeah.
And Rory Culkin's good too. We haven't talked about
him
that much, but he's very good.
Yeah.
There's a good interaction between the two children, I think.
I think you're right. They portray a really believable brother and sister relationship. At that age, they're kind of doing what they can for each other as brother and sister, but they're also kind of, I think she's, he's slightly older, so he's more channeling the angst of having lost his mom, and she's young enough where it's more confusing to her than a cause for extreme sadness.
Yeah. I think you're right.
Speaking of them and scenes that they kind of control, the scene with the dog toward the beginning, I love everything about that scene, because the way it's like led into, it's just good screenwriting, because he's talking with the sheriff out in the field, and she's saying something, and he's like becoming clearly distracted, and he says like in a completely distracted voice, like, don't call me father, right? Something like that. And then he realizes like that something is wrong.
I don't hear my children.
Yeah. then when they come back, the boy has just had to kill the dog, which is one of those things where you're like, you don't know what's happening in this movie yet, but it's definitely like a huge and clear sign that something is just amiss. I'm not sure why he killed the dog. I mean, I guess the dog I guess it doesn't really matter, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the idea that like just the presence of the aliens are driving the dogs crazy to the point where they're getting violent, and the dog tried to attack Bo, and so he kind of got in its way, and he had the fork in his hand because he was the one making the dinner, or making sure the dinner wouldn't burn, which is, again, another really a thing that Shyamalan does very subtly, which is kind of show that like his dad isn't like, he's trying, but he's like lax in some of his responsibilities.
Yeah.
Like, I think one of the reasons why there's glasses all around the house is because his dad is not really picking them up either. Not only is she leaving them, but he's really not cleaning them.
Yeah.
And the kid's the one grilling on the barbecue, and stuff like that. So.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I don't know. It's interesting. I kind of map it to a personal experience I had where our like ridiculously soft-hearted chocolate lab, quote unquote, attacked my brother. And we eventually realized that what was almost certainly happening is the dog perceived some kind of threat and was trying to pull my brother away from it, but like that's not what it looked like in the moment, right? And that's not what it felt like to my brother who was pretty small at the time. So anyway, the point is I'm mapping it onto my personal story of like maybe the dog was actually trying to protect him or like grab him with its mouth, which is
it's possible. Yeah.
I mean, I'm definitely reading too much into it at this point, but yeah, I don't know.
I mean, the cool thing. This movie's so smart in the subtle things that it does. And we've already talked about this a lot, but like when the dog peed on the floor at the very beginning of the movie, the dog pees on the floor, which they link that to, predator activities. When a predator senses another predator around, they like get really territorial and protective. But Mel Gibson says, I'll call the doctor to check on them. And his son says, she's not an animal doctor. And you don't really think anything of it at the time. But then later, when he goes over to Ray's house, played by M. Night Shyamalan, the person that killed, that was in the car that hit his wife, we learn that he's a veterinarian.
Yeah.
And like that, the movie never says anything about that. It's just like, oh, of course. Like he wouldn't go to the vet because the vet is this guy.
Yeah.
And he can't stand to be around him. And it's like little, like we talked so much about in these three movies about Shyamalan's attention to detail and how, as you said, he uses the background to tell the story, and he doesn't have to come out and write and say it. And I think this movie is very deliberate with its theming. I think, like we said, Mel Gibson basically lays the theme out for us in the negative, and then the movie proves it incorrect. But that's very textual. Like there's not a lot of subtext in the theme of this movie. It's very clearly allegorical.
Yeah.
But so much of the way, like the background, world building, character building around that theme, Shyamalan is doing via show don't tell.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's one of the other scenes in the movie that maybe doesn't work 100% is when they're in town and they see M. Night Shyamalan and they say it's him. And if you know that that's the director, you're like, this is a very meta moment. But like, you don't know why they're staring at him. You have no idea. And then eventually you figure it out. Right. But
yeah. So the other thing I wanted to talk to you about, this is a weird ass movie. like, yes, it is scary. But it's also very strange at times. And like the scene I'm thinking about specifically is the scene where Meryl is going to the military recruitment center in town to get a pamphlet on the military. And there's this guy, the I think he's a lieutenant probably. He is just the weirdest freaking guy in the world. Like he goes on this long speech about how, and the tone of his voice, it feels like we're slipping into another movie. It feels like we've slipped into a B movie because he's just like, I know what they're doing. Reconnaissance.
Yeah.
And it's just like so outlandish and so a different tone. And that whole scene is like that because like the scene starts with Meryl like looking at, I think, a poster on the wall from the military, and like the guy is in the room with him, but Meryl's body is blocking him from the camera. So then like he like has to he turns to move and reveals that guy. And then as Meryl's having a conversation with this guy, someone else is in the room filling out paperwork to join the army, who apparently was not there. like it's another thing where Meryl's blocking him from the frame, and so he moves aside, and there he is, as if he's been there the whole time. And it's just like people just keep popping into the frame. The tone is crazy. It's just this really, really random scene. I mean, I like it because I think it's hilarious and it's weird, and it's M. Night Shyamalan, but I see stuff like that, and I start to see, the weirder side of Shyamalan come out, the definite B-movie side director that I think we're going to see more and more of as we go through these movies. And I think that's a side of Shyamalan that people don't like as much.
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the things that makes that scene work better than it might is that Meryl is kind of being the straight man, and you can kind of see in his face that he is as weirded out by this army recruiter as you are.
Right.
Whereas if you didn't have that element, if you didn't have a straight man in the scene, you'd just be like, what is this? This is not how people act. But if the character's in the scene thinking that for you, then you're like, yes, movie, we're on the same page. I like that scene. I like the weird tone. I like the paranoid, creepy, like something weird is going on tone that is kind of held throughout, I'd say, the bulk of this movie, actually.
Yeah.
Where I don't know, it's unique. It's unique, and it's one of the things that I appreciate most about the movie is everyone's kind of weirdness coming out as the situation gets weirder. Like I mean one of the great moments when Mel Gibson finds them all with tinfoil hats reading the book.
It's so good.
And like the moment when like they're looking at the book and they're like, there's like basically a replica of their family lying dead in the front yard.
Yeah, their house, their exact house, and then their family. It's just weird stuff that is just like, oh, huh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
right. It's just there to be unnerving, and it's totally successful at that.
Yeah. So, okay, you love this movie. I like this movie a lot. The question I have for you is, I don't think most people, I think this is the movie where people started kind of cooling on Shyamalan a bit. And I'm curious why you think that is. I mean, this movie was still a financial success. It did well. It did well critically generally, but not nearly as well and as well acclaimed as Sixth Sense was. Why do you think that is?
I mean, I can see people viewing the ending as silly and walking out of that movie thinking that it was funny. I never had that experience. I distinctly remember going to see this movie with my family and my friend David in the theater. We were all freaked out by it, including my friend. The next week at school, someone who like one of our mutual friends, it like basically laughed at us for being scared of this movie and said like, "Oh, that movie was hilarious," and I was like, "What?" Like I was just baffled. And so the point, I don't know, I'm rambling a bit. The point is like I think a definite subset of people who watched this movie thought that it was campy and silly and didn't feel very, very affected by it. And the campiness and silliness and sort of exaggeratedness of his storytelling only increases from here.
Yeah.
Like The Sixth Sense is this small story about a boy and his dead psychologist. Unbreakable is another movie where it's actually trying really hard to be super like realistic and grounded, and even the superhero element, it's like it goes out of its way to be like, I don't know, superheroes are sort of real, but not in the way you're imagining. And then this is just a straight up alien invasion movie. There's aliens, there's God. Yeah,
I think like the thing that frustrates me, and I think you're right. I think the campy M. Night Shyamalan has always been in these movies. Mm-hmm. And it's just the varying levels, though. Like, I think I see the guy that made The Happening in The Sixth Sense. I do. I see the guy that made The Happening in Unbreakable. I definitely see the guy that made The Happening in this movie. Like, he's there. And I think it's just maybe he's getting more comfortable with himself and therefore becoming generally less mainstream because not a lot of people like weird shit.
Yeah. Yeah, I sort of can't wait to watch The Happening again.
Yeah, me too.
Which is a weird thing to say because I mean it's not like I haven't seen it before, but like I don't think he's done anything wrong in this movie. Whereas like I think the next couple, I can definitely point to things and say, despite the fact that I like these movies more than most people, I don't know why he did this way. This didn't need to be in here. This was just confusing. Whereas this movie, I mean, I guess the biggest like sort of high level criticism that or complaint or whatever would be like having like religion be in the same movie as alien invasion is just sort of weird.
Yeah, it is.
And it's kind of hard to swallow. It just kind of creates a certain like, reaction. Mm-hmm. And if you're down for something kind of weird, then that's great. Actually, you're like, oh, I see it as creative. I see it as a creative and novel combination of things I wouldn't expect to see combined that way. But if you're not down for that, then it's just going to be weird to you.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, a lot of this is like, if you came into this movie expecting an Aliens movie, which it definitely was advertised as, you're probably going to be disappointed. I think the aliens are in this movie for like a minute total.
Yeah, right.
And it is weird. It is yeah, I could see that. We'll see. I mean, we have next up is The Village, which is I think that's probably The Village is actually probably the turning point in Shyamalan's career for a lot of people.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and I think I have a much better argument for why. I think I could list a lot more things that are either wrong or maybe a better way of phrasing it would just be like not as tight as I see everything up through Signs being. Like we've talked in every one of these deconstructing Shyamalan episodes about how like he's kind of my kind of filmmaker in that everything about the film is integrated toward telling one story and focusing on one theme in this very like cohesive way, you know, down to the details of objects in the background of shots, the way things are shot through, you know, like reflections of things. And then that kind of stops being true in The Village. It kind of just starts to decohere maybe.
Yeah. No, I think you're right.
But we'll talk about The Village when we get there.
We will, and that'll be next month sometime. It's on the schedule. Okay. doofmedia.com/calendar. We will be talking about The Village soon, and I'm excited about this one. I do love this movie. I really enjoyed revisiting this movie again. It is like in the back of my mind, I've been like nervous about this project, about like, is the result of going through these movies going to make me like this director less? And I'm happy to say that 3 movies in, the answer to that is decidedly no. What he does with his camera, how deliberate he is with his setups. We didn't talk as much about his camera movements in this one. There weren't as many of like the long take, stationary camera stuff that he did so much in the other 2 films, but there's still definitely some of it here. Yeah. He has a really good eye. Like his camera setups, where he puts the camera, how he cuts, his use of lighting. The whole Mel Gibson exposits the theme of the movie plot line. The scene is beautifully shot because like it's lit with just the glow of the TV. So Mel Gibson's face is like half in shadow and half in light, and it's just it's beautiful. But I love his storytelling. I love that you're absolutely right. This idea that he takes this one theme and everything in the movie distills down to that central theme, and it's very tight. And yeah, I hope we don't see that get a little confused as we go along, but we'll see.
And if we do see that happen, then I think we'll learn something about maybe why. So I'm hopeful.
I hope so. Yeah.
I mean, I look forward to. Even if we like these movies less as we go along, I look forward to what we might learn about it.
Yeah, me too. Yeah. Me too. All right, so let's talk a little bit about Pokemon.
Yay.
So this past weekend, I saw Detective Pikachu. I know you haven't seen it yet, so I'm not going to talk about spoilers or anything, but I just wanted to talk about the movie for a bit because this is a big deal for the old video game adaptation line of
genre.
Yeah.
Or whatever.
The failed genre.
Yeah.
So this movie is fine. I think there's a lot to like about it, and I think if you like Pokemon, you're probably gonna love this movie. I really enjoyed playing Pokemon when I was younger, and then I kind of grew out of it, so I wasn't like quite as obsessed with it as before. But I think the Ryan Reynolds voices Pikachu idea is brilliant enough to carry the movie, even when it gets a little crazy. This movie's weird as hell, and I can't even explain the weirdness of this movie, but like the overarching plot of the mystery story that is this movie is like, holy crap, that's weird. But like it succeeds off the back of every single one of the Pokemon that you see that are adorable, beautifully animated and brought to life, and it's just a fun construction. Like Squirtles are firefighters, and it's just perfect. I really did enjoy it. I think it's the most successful video game movie weekend ever after the first weekend. So
yeah, I heard it like almost beat Endgame. Maybe just this weekend.
Yeah, it almost beat Endgame in its third weekend.
Yeah,
yes.
which is still saying something.
Yes.
Yeah. So you know what I'm going to ask? Would little kids enjoy this?
Yes, very much so. Very much so. There's interesting because the movie, like you see the trailers and it kind of feels like, oh, Ryan Reynolds is doing his Deadpool stuff, but it's a kids movie, so he can't do his Deadpool stuff, and that's very true. However, it does kind of push the envelope with some of it. I mean, it's stuff that would go over kids' heads, but like, I mean, Pikachu says hell a few times, and you're just like, all right. And like at one point he mentions the main character like going through his mom's birth canal, and you're just like, Pikachu. But that's kind of stuff that your kids will not get that part. So like it's like that's the designed for adults humor that they threw in there. They had Ryan Reynolds do.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of in all the Disney movies too, but it does sound like it's a little bit closer to the edge there. But yeah, no, that sounds fine. That's fine.
I think the lead, Justice Smith, he's fine. He's fine. This movie, it has Catherine Newton in it as the female lead of this movie. I don't know if you ever saw the movie Blockers.
No.
She was in Blockers. She's very funny in Blockers, and she's kind of just barely in this movie. Like this just really, the focus of the movie is Ryan Reynolds and his trainer, Tim Goodman, Pokemon trainer. It criminally underuses Ken Watanabe, unfortunately.
Yeah, of course.
But it has Chris Gere in it from You're the Worst, a show on FX, and he's hilarious. There's a lot to like here. There's a lot to like. I think I gave it 2.5 stars out of 5. It's not going to blow you away.
You're so harsh, Scott. Yeah, no, I'll probably take the kids to see this one.
Yeah, I think they would probably enjoy it. There's fuzzy little animals.
Yeah.
Like Pikachu's wearing a detective hat. That's all you need.
My kids are approaching the age where I have to take them to movies, not because I think they need to see the movie, but because they need to be one of the cool kids in their school who has seen the movie.
Yeah, I gotcha.
You know, so
I gotcha.
Doof.
All right, Matt, you know what time it is?
It's time to ring the bells.
The bells. We got to talk about Game of Thrones. So, okay. Spoilers for all 5 episodes of Game of Thrones, obviously.
Yeah, skip ahead to...
Yeah, if you haven't watched
blank.
the show. Yeah, skip ahead. It's the end. Just skip ahead to the outro. Matt, what did you think of this episode?
Well, I love this episode, asterisk. The asterisk, the text, hold on, let me read the fine print. Relative to everyone on Twitter.
There you go.
Because, like, here's the thing. This has been the case for several of these episodes this season where, like, I'm watching them and I'm like, wow, this is amazing. It's too bad that everything that's happening is predicated on these characters breaking with, like, the established, you know, who I know them to be and how I know them to behave. and thus it makes it very difficult for me to see this as like part of the same show that it was last year or the year before or the year before. But like, man, damn, if this isn't good TV though? Like it's a weird kind of like, I'm actually sitting there enjoying the episode. It's just there's a part of my mind that's like, yep, you already know what's wrong with this. It doesn't make any sense. But but I can still enjoy the spectacle of it.
This was one of the most technically beautiful, effective, and wonderful filmmaking I've ever seen the show do.
Yeah.
The structure of the episode, the editing, the sheer spectacle of it is fantastic. In all the ways in which I think the Battle of Winterfell failed technically, this episode succeeded. It was beautiful. It was awe-inspiring. They built a whole fucking city so they could light it on fire. The scale of it, the craft at work here, the performances, every one of these actors is giving their all. I think Emilia Clarke, like think about Emilia Clarke sitting on a fake dragon in a green screen room, having to telegraph the decision to become a monster, basically. Yeah. And I think she pulled it off.
Yeah.
I don't think it works for the reasons you said.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't, like, structurally the show did not set up these things to happen efficient enough for you to buy them. However, everything else around it is beautiful. Like I am not kidding when I say I loved this episode. And like I was very upset about it, you know, coming off the episode. I turned off the TV at the end and I was like, what the fuck? And I was mad and I was ranting on Twitter just about with everyone else. But then over the course of the days after that, I noticed the things that I appreciated about it rising up and the things that I didn't like about it disappearing a little bit. And I'm left with, wow, that was really impressive.
Yeah.
That was really impressive.
Yeah. I mean, you know, Tyrion has always been a favorite, but like, I feel like, God, everyone's name is escaping me right now. I know these actors' names. Kit Harington, for example, like I've always thought he was just kind of blah.
Yeah.
The whole show. This season, he finally is actually conveying complicated emotions happening under the surface. Like his reaction to seeing what Dany's doing and Peter Dinklage's reaction to that moment, both of them, they almost make the episode, like them and they're just like disbelief and reeling and shock from what they're seeing is a big part of what I love about this episode. And then of course, you know, Arya running through the streets, another great performance. Just generally, I think the performances are a standout thing that's happening in this episode. Like you said, I don't know how, I genuinely don't know how they shot some of these things. Like I just, I mean, I know that a lot of it must have been effects, but a lot of it wasn't. And I just don't know how you do that. Like, it's just so, like, I guess I've seen all those things before, but not sort of in the continuous takes that they were doing in this episode.
Yeah. I mean, the Arya Sandor Clegane cut back and forth was just, I thought it was fantastic. It was handled so well. I loved it. I loved the linking these two characters as one reaches the end of their revenge subplot and the other goes the other way on the revenge subplot. And as they struggle through those decisions, one trying to survive, one throwing their life away for the sake of revenge, cutting back and forth between the two of them, I thought was fantastic. It was a great decision. It was a great directorial move. It worked. It was wonderful. I don't think the Hound's story was ever really about revenge until they decided it would be, because all the fans kept talking about Clegane Bowl. But sure.
Yeah, right. That's the thing. That's exactly it, right? Like you can enjoy the episode as long as you basically forget who these characters are.
Yep.
Because Clegane had this whole thing where he like met, you know, he lived with this community and like a religious man kind of taught him to see his life in a different way, and then he goes off and he fights for the living against the undead and you know becomes this like fairly righteous warrior. Yeah, he's always going to be rough around the edges. he's never going to be a knight in shining armor type guy, but that doesn't mean that he's still consumed by this one destructive purpose that dominated his life when he was younger, and then we don't have any ideas of how to deal with him, so he's got to go have Clegane Bowl and die in literal fire, which is like the worst possible way that you could have killed him. Good job.
Yeah, well, like, I mean, the thing about that is, like, when book readers were speculating about the idea of Clegane Bowl, their idea was that Cersei is going to pick Gregor as her, trial by combat representative,
right?
And the church is going to pick the Hound,
right?
Because he's now a member of the church.
Yeah.
So it had nothing to do with him like seeking revenge for his brother, right? Against his brother. Like it was just that's the way the thing kind of fell, and it's poetic, yes, but I just never saw the end of his plot about revenge specifically. Like I do think he hated his brother, and his brother screwed up his life, and there are times when he definitely wanted to kill him. But I thought the point of his interactions with Sansa and the point of his interactions with Arya was to kind of show how he moves away from that path. I mean, and then it's just like, nope.
I mean, it clearly was, and then they were like, what are we gonna do? How are we gonna end this? Oh no.
Yeah.
Put quick. We'll figure it out later. Yada yada yada, as you said.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's the thing when we talked about it last week too. Is like the discourse on the internet this week has either been people who are furious with the episode and are mad because Dany went crazy, or people that are being assholes to everyone who's mad at Dany going crazy and being like, you didn't see this from the beginning. And like, it's not that I have a problem with Dany going Mad Queen. I think that's where George is probably going to go with it too. I honestly think that's where he's going. I just don't think the show lived up to that central idea for the past 5 years.
No.
Like I think they did a little bit here and there,
Yeah.
But I don't think that they laid the tracks to make that moment where she's sitting there on the ramparts of the castle. They've won. The bells are ringing. She did it. The kingdom is hers. And she makes the choice to do it anyway. I just don't think they set up that moment to where it felt like a thing that the character that we knew would do.
I think that the books have already set it up better, and the books are well behind where the show is. Like
I agree.
Like because in the books, like in the show, you actually, if you're just a show watcher, you believe that Dany successfully liberated all of these slaver cities, and basically everything is great.
Mm-hmm.
In the books, it's clear that every one of these slaver cities that she liberated is now much worse than when she arrived. That basically just like some strong man has taken control, like some like literal butcher has taken control as soon as she left each of them. And George goes out of his way to make it like just like comically horrible. And I'm pretty sure that in the next book, like Marine is going to be destroyed completely.
Yeah.
Instead of being like happily left behind while she's Dany's story is one of destroying everything in her wake on her way to Westeros.
Yep.
She's not a liberator. She's a force of destruction and chaos.
Yeah.
And fire and blood and change. And that is not how they portrayed her in the show. They portrayed her as the savior, which the book goes out of its way not to. It refuses to let you be deluded into thinking that. So
yeah, and that's the show's fault. Like that's why when people are like, this is always what Game of Thrones was about. This is always what A Song of Ice and Fire was about. It's always about how there's no winner in war, how all this is bad and destructive. And I was like, will you tell that to the showrunners? Because that's not the way they were playing the show for the past 2 years. Like I know we've talked about this before, but Arya chopping people up and feeding them to a bad guy for revenge was not played as a horrifying, oh my God, look what she's become person. It was played as victory for the Starks, fuck yeah. And that's what they've done again and again and again throughout the show with these characters. That's what they've done with Dany. They've made her, you're absolutely right, seem like the justified liberator. And yes, she's had darkness in her. She burned the Tarleys alive. That's fucked up. She killed people. I've watched the internet go over every bad thing she's done on the show. Yes, she watched her brother die and had no emotion as it happened. Yeah, but for every moment where she does something cold and evil is like 10 moments of like her saying Dracarys and killing the bad guy that definitely deserved to die, right? And it's just like, this is the show's inability to not chase the spectacle and delight in the spectacle of explosions and dragon and fire and this stuff, that you can't then at the very last minute go, no, actually, wait, all this stuff was horrible.
Yeah, right.
Just kidding.
Yeah. We spent 8 years on this, guys. You can't. Yeah, I mean, like one perfect book show contrast that I think illustrates this really well. Speaking of the Frey pie, is like when you see the Brotherhood without banners like brutally murder Freys, you're seeing it from the perspective of what is basically like a hapless, innocent Frey. Like 18th in line to the house, and he's just some idiot, and they're gonna horribly murder him because he's on the wrong side of their gang war, basically, and it sucks. Like there's nothing triumphant about it. You're like, oh, I mean, I don't like this guy necessarily, but he clearly doesn't deserve this, and the people who are killing him are clearly not like righteous. Whereas when the show does it, it's just like, yeah, she killed all the Freys. They all clearly deserved it.
Yep.
And that's it. No nuance, please. Thank you.
Yeah. How did you feel about the clear 9/11 illusion with Arya in the covered in smoke or covered in ash in the city? A lot of people are like, that's a little heavy-handed, and I'm like, yeah, okay, maybe, but it's also really effective.
I honestly, I mean, I'm trying to decide whether I think that it counts as a 9/11 reference if it's something that would realistically happen in the situation anyway, you know? Like, yeah, that imagery certainly brings to mind 9/11 because we know that that's concrete pulverizes and covers people in powder, but like that's also just a fact about what would happen if a building had fallen on her, right? So I don't know. I can't bring myself to feel too much about it either way. I mean, do you have a take on it?
I don't mind it. I mean, like, I think you're absolutely right that, like, are we never allowed to cover people in ash anymore?
Right.
Because we're going to say that's a 9/11 reference. I mean, I think in this case it is, because, like, it's a thing destroying the city and killing a bunch of innocent people, and that's kind of what they were going for, but I didn't mind it. I liked what they did with Arya in this episode.
Yeah.
The pale horse, riding off on the pale horse was maybe a little heavy-handed, a little bit.
Yeah, I definitely noticed that. Yeah, no, like for all of what I feel are the character missteps, I like this idea that Arya she much more than Sandor was driven by revenge. That's her whole character, and she reaches this moment at the end where it's like, you know, death is going to find that Cersei anyway. Just save yourself. Yeah, and you've kind of wanted her to find that the whole time. Like even in the books, you want Arya to be happy, right? You want her to have a life that doesn't involve having to kill people constantly. So I liked that, actually.
That's another thing that I feel like George is going to do differently, though, because I feel like the idea of the Faceless Men in the books is that to get the revenge that she seeks, she has to reject her humanity, right? She has to stop being Arya. And I feel like the show wanted it both ways for a while. Like, it wanted her to be this angel of revenge while also still allowing her to be Arya Stark of Winterfell.
Yeah. I don't think the show understood what George was trying to do with the Faceless Men, honestly.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. And I mean, since we're probably not going to use them ever again, I really thought they were going to do a Faceless Men thing in this season. It doesn't seem like that's happening.
It could still happen. I mean,
It could.
I mean, because like I don't know, we could make like a prediction for the very last episode, right?
Yeah.
Like it seems like my sort of like first feeling, which is probably not going to be correct, but I was just like, okay, let's see. We've got Arya leaving on a literal pale horse.
Yeah.
We've got
certainly
Danny
seem to be setting her up to kill someone.
We've got Danny, who like everyone around her is going to be like, all right, how do we get rid of her?
Yep.
Now the thing is, it's gonna be like surprising, but is it gonna be surprising because it's Tyrion, or because it's Jon, or because it's Arya, like, or someone else that I haven't thought of? I still think it's gonna be Arya's squeeze, and then he's gonna be king. That's my theory. Even though he's not even here.
Gendry's going to be king still?
Yeah.
Still? Okay.
Yeah, Gendry,
Okay.
Gendry Baratheon, the legitimized rightful king of Westeros.
Okay. There you go. Yeah. I think they're certainly telegraphing that Arya is going to be the one to do the deed. But I don't know. I feel like they need to give Jon something to do. Maybe what Jon does at the end is just say, fuck this. He doesn't kill her, but he's also like, I just because she's dead doesn't mean I'm going to suddenly be your king. So
Yeah.
maybe he's just like, later.
Yeah,
I'm out.
that. I'd like that. I'd feel pretty bored if he was just like, okay, he's king now, the end.
Yeah.
And I don't know, that would actually surprise me quite a bit if they did just make Jon the king, because that's so like, oh, really? The destined warrior of legend, young man who returned from the dead is the king at the end? Wow, shocking twist.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. All right. So one more episode.
Yeah. And then we'll find out how the show ends.
Yeah, and we'll be back to talk about it next week. Before we go, I want to say one more thing about it that I liked. The thing I've been complaining about the show for a while is that we weren't spending like any time showing how like the regular people are affected by this Game of Thrones.
Right.
So I think the decision to take these two random commoners in this episode and really kind of pivot the episode around their struggle to survive this war and eventual burning to death. Thanks, Arya. I think that was a very smart decision.
Yeah, I agree.
To do that.
I mean, I think, I know I keep talking about the books, but like the whole Feast for Crows book was, here is the horrible effect of this war on the commoners, and the show actually did a little bit of this. There were a few episodes where we got to know some commoners and then they were butchered, and then we got to know some more commoners and then they were butchered. So it's been a while since we had that though, so I think we kind of forgot. So yeah, I agree.
Yeah,
It's good
I think
that
the last two seasons especially, I think kind of abandoned that.
Yeah.
So that's Game of Thrones, The Bells. Apparently ringing the bells is something that everyone in the city knows about somehow.
Yeah.
It's really random. I thought that was just something Tyrion made up, and then everyone in the city was like, ring the bells.
Well,
it's like, oh, wait.
It's funny. It's like what Preston said. Like, I thought
he
ringing the
did.
bells meant the monarch was dead. No? Something else? Okay.
We just have multiple bell ringing sequences.
Yeah, right.
We didn't even talk about Jaime and Cersei. That was fine.
I mean, I'm just as disappointed in that as I am in everything else. Like the idea that that's the ending of his character. It's just like, oh, so basically he's the same as he was in the first scene of the show when he pushed the little boy out the window. He's not really grown or changed.
Yeah, but he feels like bad about it now.
Okay.
So, you know.
So it was like a redemption arc, except then at the very end, it completely unravels and cool.
And I don't care. Like, if the book goes there, I won't be upset about it, because I think that's a fascinating thing to explore. Like this idea that like sometimes you can't get better. And I just think that the show didn't earn it. Like just with Dany, I think that like the turn to, oh yeah, by the way, I'm gonna go die with her now because I cannot ever escape her. Just like I didn't feel like I didn't get that. I was like, why did that happen to you then? You know, like you need to make me feel your decision there. Yeah. And the show failed to do it.
I wonder if this show might go down smoother in a more binge like fashion. Like watching, because I don't know. I feel like maybe these things would actually feel more justified if we saw all of the character beats associated with this character kind of one after another instead of spread out over a huge period of time.
Yeah.
Maybe not.
Maybe.
I don't know.
That would require me to have to watch the show again.
Right.
I don't want to do that.
Okay, fair enough.
All right, guys. That is all we had for you this week. If you have any opinions on Signs, Pikachu, Game of Thrones, man, we're like it's the holy trinity of pop culture right there.
Yeah.
You can reach out to us via email at doofmedia@gmail.com or over on our Twitter account @doofmedia.
Yeah, and if you're not already subscribed to this podcast, we encourage you to do so and ensure you never miss an episode. You can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, Google Play, and pretty much anywhere else podcasts can be found.
And you can find all the other shows we do over at our website, doofmedia.com. That's where you can find Vow to View and Deep Impact and our big show, We've Got Ward, which is about a book that you should read.
Yeah, definitely. If you haven't heard of it somehow, totally.
Yeah. I think we have some listeners that do not also listen to the Worm and Ward podcast. Just a few.
I think you're right.
If you like what we do here and you want to support us, consider becoming a patron of Doof Media. Head on over to patreon.com/doofmedia and pledge $1 a month or whatever else you can afford. Each and every bit of your support helps us make this show better, helps us make new stuff, helps us support the stuff that we are already making. It allows us to do this, and we are so thankful for each and every one of you that do that.
Yeah, we really appreciate all y'all. Also, please consider rating and reviewing the show on Apple Podcasts. Every review helps us get more exposure and introduces new people to the content that we make here.
All right, guys, we will see you all next week when we cover Season 2 of Avatar: The Last Airbender.
My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say. My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say.